Hello, welcome to the live stream. Not the hardest clue this week, but I thought it would be a little bit funny at least. Thank you for the lovely greeting. So this is going to be a little bit different. There's no pattern for these, so it's not going to be different because they're all different. It's going to be a little bit different in that I'm going to try to read. I'm reading through the section of the book that I think of as the animal section because it's all about animals, and I want to do two things here. One is to read these three things out loud and make sure that they sound okay and see if they seem okay together. And then the other is to include a couple of examples of how I actually research and write this stuff. So one of the essays is about Canada geese. I have these two books about Canada geese, the two most important books, as far as I can tell, about Canada geese, both written in the 1960s. The World of the Canada Goose by Joe Van Wormer, which I found, to be honest, of limited utility. I hope that Joe Van Warner is not listening. It's a beautifully written book, but it's full of it's full of things that I don't find important, and also I don't agree with. But I've marked some pages in this book that I found helpful and that I might be able to use for the book. And so I'm going to try to model how I do research, and with the Canada Goose one especially, because there's a couple things I want to add. And then I also have this book, which is called The Giant Canada Goose, and is incredibly interesting because it was written not too long after the giant Canada goose, which had long been believed extinct, was established to have never died out, and in fact now is the dominant subspecies of Canada geese in the world today. So and there's a couple things that I think are interesting that may or may not end up in that essay. So it's going to be a little different because it's going to be a lot of time where I'm quiet because I'm trying to figure out where to put in the Canada Goose stuff. So we're going to start with this Velociraptors one, see how that works, and see if this transition among these three essays that right now in the book anyway are consecutive and are all about animals, make sure that they work. Okay, this is about Velociraptors. Until 1990, when Michael Crichton's novel Jurassic Park was published, velociraptors were not particularly well-known dinosaurs. The book, about a theme park containing dinosaurs created from cloned DNA samples, became a runaway bestseller, and 3 years later, Steven Spielberg's film adaptation brought the novel's dinosaurs to awe-inspiring life, with computer-generated animations, the likes of which moviegoers had never seen before. Even 25 years later, Jurassic Park's dinosaurs still look astonishingly lifelike, including the velociraptors, which are portrayed as scaly creatures about 6 feet in height from present-day Montana. In the film franchise, they are not just vicious, but also terrifyingly intelligent. In Jurassic Park 3, one scientist character claims that velociraptors are, quote, smarter than dolphins, smarter than primates. In the movies, they figure out how to open a door. In fact, the first time I remember hearing my brother Hank curse came when we were watching Jurassic Park for the first time. When the velocity, that's a lot of whens. As we were watching, yeah, that's better anyway. In fact, the first time I remember, in the movies, they figure out how to open a door. In fact, the first time I remember hearing my brother Hank curse came as we were watching Jurassic Park for the first. Oh, it's the repetition of first time that's bothersome. It wasn't actually the when. In fact, the first time I remember hearing my brother Hank curse came as we were watching Jurassic Park. When the velociraptors turned the door handle, I heard my little brother mutter, "Oh, shit." Crichton's velociraptors are the kind of scary, intimidating animals you might want to name, say, a professional sports franchise after. And indeed, when the National Basketball Association expanded into Canada in 1995, Toronto chose the Raptors as its team nickname. Today, the velociraptor stands alongside T Rex and Stegosaurus as among the best known dinosaurs, even though the actual creatures that lived in the late Cretaceous period, some 70 million years ago, have almost nothing in common with the velociraptors of our contemporary imagination. For starters, velociraptors did not live in what is now Montana. They lived in what is now Mongolia and China, hence their scientific name, Velociraptor mongoliensis. While they were smart for dinosaurs, they were not smarter than dolphins. Isn't dolphins or apes? Dolphins or primates. They were probably closer to chickens or possums. Also, they were not 6 feet tall. They were about the size of a contemporary turkey, but with a very long tail that could stretch for over 3 feet. They are estimated to have weighed less than 15 kilograms, so it's hard to imagine one killing a human. In fact, they were probably mostly scavengers, eating meat from already dead carcasses. I'm not going to say also there because I feel like I've alsoed out this whole concept. Furthermore, velociraptors were not scaly, but feathered. We know this because researchers found quill knobs on a velociraptor's forearm in 2007, but even in Crichton's day, most paleontologists thought velociraptors and other members of the dromaeosaurid family were feathered. Although velociraptors are not believed to have flown, their ancestors probably did. Mark Norrell of the American Museum of Natural History put it this way: the more we learn about these animals, the more we find out that there is basically no difference between birds and their closely related dinosaur ancestors like Velociraptor. Both have wishbones, brooded their nests, possess hollow bones, and were covered in feathers. If animals like Velociraptor were alive today, our first impression would be that they were just very unusual looking birds. Indeed, as a guide recently pointed out to me at the Houston Museum of Natural History, pictures of birds without feathers look a lot like pictures of dinosaurs. Now, velociraptors did probably at least sometimes hunt. A famous fossil discovered in 1971 in Mongolia preserved a velociraptor locked in battle with a pig-sized dinosaur called Protoceratops. The velociraptor appears to have had one of its sickle-shaped claws embedded in the neck of the Protoceratops, which was biting down on the velociraptor's arm when they were both suddenly buried in sand, perhaps due to a collapsing sand dune. But we don't know how often velociraptors hunted, or how successfully, or whether they hunted in packs. Crichton based his velociraptors on a different dinosaur, the Deinonychus, which did live in present-day Montana and was the approximate size and shape of Jurassic Park's velociraptors. Crichton took the name Velociraptor because he thought it was more dramatic, which presumably is also why the theme park is called Jurassic Park, even though most of the dinosaurs in the park did not live during the Jurassic Age, which ended 145 million years ago, but instead in the Cretaceous Age, which ended 65 million years ago with the extinction event that resulted in the disappearance of around 3/4 of all plant and animal species on Earth, including all large species of what we now consider dinosaurs. And so our image of velociraptors ends up saying much more about us than it does about them. Really, even what we do know or think we know about dinosaurs is endlessly shaped by assumptions and presuppositions, some of which will eventually prove incorrect. In ancient China, dinosaur fossils were long believed to be dragon bones. In 1676, the first dinosaur bone to be described by European scientists, a piece of thigh bone from a megalosaurus, was believed to have come from the giants described in the Bible. There's a footnote there. That bone, incidentally, was named Scrotum humanum, which is a reasonable description of its approximate shape. Megalosaurus was first described in a scientific journal in 1824, around the time paleontologist Mary Ann Mantell discovered the first known fossils of an iguanodon. The Tyrannosaurus rex wasn't named until 1905. The first velociraptor fossil was discovered in 1924. Scientists have been debating for over a century whether the long-necked brontosaurus of the Jurassic Age even existed or is just a misidentified apatosaurus. The brontosaurus was real in the late 19th century, only to become a fiction for much of the 20th, only to become real again in the last few years. History is new, and prehistory is newer, and paleontology is newer still. But the weird thing to me about velociraptors is that even though I know they were basically flightless carnivorous birds about the size of a swan, when I imagine them, I can't help but see the raptors of Jurassic Park. Knowing the facts does not help me picture the truth. That's the wonder and terror of computer generated images for me. If they look real, my brain is not nearly sophisticated enough to understand that they still aren't real. We've long known that images are unreliable. Kafka wrote that nothing is as deceptive as a photograph, and yet I still can't help but believe them. There's a footnote there. Susan Sontag points out in Regarding the Suffering of Others that even staged or manipulated photographs, like, say, the highly staged photographs of US Civil War battlefields taken by Alexander Gardner, quote, turn back into historical evidence, albeit of an impure kind, like most historical evidence. We know that Gardner and his assistants dragged corpses into different positions to make the war look a certain way, and yet documentary films about the Civil War inevitably show those photos as historical evidence, and they inevitably feel real to us. Like the velociraptor, I have a large brain for my geologic age, but maybe not large enough to survive effectively in the world where I find myself. Is it better to I have a large brain for my geologic age, but maybe not a large enough one to survive effectively in the world where I find myself? Or is it better I have a large brain for my geologic age, but maybe not large enough? I think maybe not large enough to survive effectively. I don't know that you need the A in the one there. Like the velociraptor, I have a large brain for my geologic age, but maybe not large enough to survive effectively in the world where I find myself. My eyes still believe what they see long after visual information stopped being reliable. Still, I'm fond of raptors, both the ones I've seen that never existed and the ones that did exist that I've never seen. I give velociraptors 3.5 stars. And the ones that did exist that I've never seen, which I've never seen. I mean, I think that's okay. It's a nice sentiment. I just got to figure out the wording of it. Canada geese. I'm just going to call it, say, okay. The Canadian, so now we're going to trans, I think that's all fine. I don't have an issue with any of that, but I also already rewrote it, so why would I have an issue with any of it? It's only been a day. All right, let's go. We're going to go on to the next one, and we're going to see. I'm more worried about the second and third one in conjunction with each other. The Canadian goose, and then there's a footnote, also known as the Canada goose, at least to pedants who enjoy pointing out that geese have no nationality, is a brown-bodied, black-necked, honking waterfowl that has recently become ubiquitous in suburban North America, Europe, and New Zealand. With a song like a dying balloon and a penchant for attacking humans, the Canada goose is hard to love. But then again, so are most of us. These days, the world contains between 4 and 6 million Canada geese. And then there's a footnote. You may wonder, as I have, whether U.S. ornithologists assigned Canada to the goose's name for the same reason that Italians called syphilis the French disease, while the Poles called it the German disease, and the Russians called it the Polish disease. The answer is no. Taxonomists first observed them in Canada. I don't know if that joke works, but I really like it. God, I hate Canada geese. These days, the world contains between 4 and 6 million Canada geese, that footnote, although from where I'm sitting in Indianapolis, that estimate seems low, as there appear to be 6 million of them currently residing in my backyard. Regardless, global Canada geese populations are growing, but they were once exceptionally rare. In fact, the subspecies you're most likely to see in parks and retention ponds, the giant Canada goose, was believed to be extinct early in the 20th century due to year-round unrestricted hunting. All right, this is the moment where I'm going to go into this book, and okay, there's a couple of really good okay, there's a couple of good moments here. All right. So we've got the giant Canada goose appears to be extinct from 1954, which is not the hottest quote I've ever read. There can be no memorial to Missouri's goose, hypocritically dating the passing of the last of the race. We do not know when the last one fell. None of these are great. None of those are great, are they? So I could just say, all right, maybe this is good. No. Okay. So I'm not going to include any of that because none of those. So this is a bunch of quotes about the extinction of the Canada goose, but none of them are good. I mean, let's see. I mean, there are some that are almost good, but the giant Canada goose appears to be extinct is the best one, and that's not that good. Let's face it. Okay, so this, as it happens, this guy helped rediscover the giant Canada goose, and there is a really good quote here. It was in mid-January 1962. So, all right. So I'm gonna put it here. Something about, okay, in mid-January 1962. What's this guy's name? His wife's name is Arlone, my wife, who has helped me so much. He dedicated the book to her. His name is Harold C. Hansen. All right. Was among the ornithologists who tracked and measure some Minnesota geese. On that memorable day, he would later write, the temperature held around 0 and a strong wind blew, but this only added to the zest, zest to the enterprise. That's a great, that's a quote. The geese they weighed were so huge. Geese they weighed were so huge that they thought the scales must be off. But no, it turned out giant Canada goose had survived. Okay. Next year, the U.S. Department of the Interior released a press. You know, okay, I don't think I need that press release. I have this thing about the Department of the Interior releasing a press release called Giant Canada Goose Long Believed Extinct, Rediscovered in Minnesota, but I think telling the story directly is better. Okay. All right, so I'm just going to delete that for now. All right, so then we've got like 3 other moments in this book that I thought might be at least worth looking at. Let's see here. This is about their wintering grounds. The widely dispersed wintering grounds of the giant Canada goose have been indicated in the previous discussion on migration. Many flocks tend to be relatively non-migratory if food and some open water are available. It is chiefly the populations nesting in the northern sectors of the Great Plains in the United States that are forced to migrate because of the extreme climatic conditions. In primitive times, limitations of both factors, primitive times. As Irving has stated, individual and social behavior must direct animals to localities. Although a few giant Canadas winter on nearly every major wintering ground for waterfowl in the western half of the United States, it would be pointless to attempt to describe all these in detail. Instead, I have deemed it adequate to list the major wintering grounds. None of this is very interesting. Why did I highlight this page? Was I excited about the idea of non-migratory flocks, which I already know about? Maybe. I don't know. Yeah, I wish that I used a highlighter instead of this long-standing habit of just turning over the pages. But here we are. Okay, let's move on to the next thing that I have highlighted. The giant Canada goose has been the subject of a number of nesting studies, although the racial identity of the observed flocks was not known at the time or was wrongly assigned. As a result of the investigations, breeding cycle. Okay. In its use of such habitats, perhaps the only common denominator requisite in all these habitat types are that they are available in large blocks and include bodies of water of moderate to large size with large blocks and include. This is extremely boring. None of why did I highlight that? That could not. That is soul crushing in its boringness. Okay. Oh, okay. So this is interesting. That they eat mostly Poa pratensis, like their favorite food is Poa pratensis, and I want to include that somewhere. All right, so where am I going to include that? Okay, yeah, ideal living conditions. Geese enjoy rural fields near rivers and lakes. Okay, yeah, no. So, in fact, one of their very favorite. One ornithologist observed goslings and adults were found to show a marked preference for Poa pratensis from about 36 hours after hatching. Okay. Okay. All right. So that is actually useful. And I am grateful to the author for this. All right. Then I have one more thing that I've highlighted, which is, fossils. Right. I wanted to try to find out the temporal range of the Canada goose, because this hypothesizes that the giant Canada goose has been around since the Pliocene, but I'm not sure that that's true. I mean, this book was written in 1963, so it doesn't necessarily. I don't want Google to know my location at the moment, so it wasn't necessarily. Let's see here: temporal range, Pleistocene to present. Well, where's the Pleistocene? That's the Permian. Guys, you can't do this to me. What are we? So, I mean, are we talking about like 50,000 years ago, or are we talking about like 500,000 years ago? Because it's like we found it. So this says that Canada geese bones were found alongside an ulna of some kind of bison that doesn't exist anymore, Bison occidentalis. So it's a little. I mean, when you're talking about a period that lasted like 2.5 million years, it's a little hard to know if we're talking about 12,000 years ago or 2 million years ago. And I don't think that I'm going to find the answer today. And also, I'm not sure that it matters much, since I've covered the temporal range of bird species elsewhere, including in the Velociraptors one. Okay, now we're going to switch over to this other book by Joe Van Wormer that I didn't like as much, but it has much more. This book actually taught me less about the Canada goose, but got me way more. But it has lots of very flowery sentences, which are good for quoting. The term wild goose means only one thing to most people: a large gray-brown bird with a black neck and white cheek patches, the Canada goose. Despite the fact that there are 7 other bird species of geese that nest on the North American mainland, the Canada is the one that most excites the imagination and quickens the heartbeat. I wouldn't. That's so good though. Um, um, I mean, that's so good. Excites the imagination and quickens the heartbeat. Well, yeah. I mean, I think the place where that could go is, I don't know. I don't know if I can use that. It's just good. Excites the imagination and quickens the heartbeat. The generic and specific name of the Canada goose is Brant. Confusion often results from the colloquial Canadian honker, the squealer. I liked this line that it's a bird with great dignity and courage. It is self-sufficient and independent and is antagonistic only toward those creatures that constitute a threat to its nesting territory or family. I thought that was just a good sentence, but again, I don't think I can really use it. Okay. Let's see here. Goose grease was often used in... Oh, this is actually pretty interesting. I don't know if I can use this either, but it's interesting. This bird yielded another important and oft-mentioned item, goose grease, a highly regarded substance. It was useful in cooking and various medicinal treatments. For instance, it could be blended with turpentine and rubbed on chests to ease coughs and colds. It was also supposed to relieve earaches and soothe rheumatism. Okay. Interesting, but I don't know. Paintings of Canada geese have twice been used on U.S. migratory bird hunting stamps. I mean, that's the kind of high-quality information that I'm really excited for. Okay. This includes what the Ojibwe word was for Canada goose, which is interesting. But I don't know if there's a place for it. Canada geese seem quite sensitive to vocalizations, no doubt. Mating. I don't really want to know about the mating. That's not really the vibe I'm going for in this essay. Modern archers who shoot mostly at straw targets use several million arrows a year, and there would not be enough Canada geese to supply that demand. For feathers of necessity, arrows are now fetched with the feathers of domestic turkeys. Okay, I don't know why I was so into that, but I was. Okay, all right. I mean, let's see how it goes with that relatively small addition. Okay. All right. Right. These days, regardless, global Canada geese populations are growing, but they were once exceptionally rare. In fact, the subspecies you're most likely to see in parks and retention ponds, the giant Canada goose, was believed to be extinct early in the 20th century due to year-round unrestricted hunting. Canada geese were particularly susceptible to so-called live decoys. Hunters would capture geese and render them flightless, and then the call of these captured geese would attract flocks of wild ones, which could then be shot. Hunters often doted on their live decoys. A hunter named Philip Haberman wrote, "Watching and listening to the decoys work was akin to the pleasure of hunting with a fine dog, a reminder that humans have long drawn strange lines between pet and prey." But in 1935, live decoys were made illegal, and geese populations began to recover, very slowly at first, and then spectacularly. In mid-1962, Harold C. Hansen was among the ornithologists who sought to band, weigh, and measure some Minnesota geese. On that memorable day, he would later write, the temperature held around zero and a strong wind blew, but this only added the zest to the enterprise. The geese they weighed were so huge that they thought the scales might be off, but no. It turned out the giant Canada goose had survived. These days, there are over 100,000 giant Canada geese in Minnesota. Non-native populations of geese from Australia to Scandinavia have also exploded. In Britain, the Canada goose population has risen by a factor of at least 20 in the past 60 years. This success is partly down to those laws protecting the birds, but also because in the past several decades, humans have rendered lots of land perfect for geese. Heavily landscaped suburbs, riverside parks, and golf courses with water features are absolutely ideal living conditions for them. In fact, one of the Canada goose's preferred foods is the most abundant agricultural crop grown in the United States, Poa pratensis. Is the most abundant agricultural crop grown in the United States. Poa pratensis, or Kentucky bluegrass. Grass that dominates many American yards, parks, and just yards and parks for now. So they only eat the seeds. They don't eat the grass. I want to make that clear. One of the Canada goose's preferred foods is the seeds. All right, so it's Poa pratensis seeds. I mean, how do I say that? In fact, one of the Canada goose's preferred foods is okay. In fact, one of the Canada goose's preferred foods is the seeds. I don't love that. In fact, one of the Canada goose's favorite. I'm going to go over to the chat and see if you guys have an idea. Are the seeds of the Poa pratensis plant? Yeah, maybe. That's a good idea. Okay. All right. One of the Canada goose's favorite foods are the seeds of the Poa pratensis plant. Is the most agricultural crop in the United States, also known as Kentucky bluegrass. We grow Poa pratensis in parks and in our front yards, although the plant is of limited utility to humans, and then I'll footnote that because I have a review of Kentucky bluegrass elsewhere in this book. Okay. Although the plant is of limited utility to humans, and since the plant is of limited utility to humans, geese must feel like we plant it just for them. Okay, here we go. Now we've got it. In fact, one of the Canada goose's favorite foods are the seeds of the Poa pratensis plant, which is the most abundant agricultural crop in the United States. Also known as Kentucky bluegrass, we grow Poa pratensis in parks and in our front yards, and since the plant is of limited utility to humans, geese must feel like we plant it just for them. One ornithologist observed goslings and adults were found to show a marked preference for Poa pratensis from about 36 hours after hatching. Geese also enjoy rural fields near rivers and lakes, but the ratio of city geese to country geese in the United States is actually quite similar to the human ratio. At any given time, about 80% of American humans are in or near urban areas. For Canada geese, it's about 75%. Most of us have seen geese flying in their famed V formation south as winter approaches or north as the weather warms in spring. And during migratory periods, geese can fly up to 1,500 miles per day. They've been known to fly from North America to Europe. But the Anthropocene is changing the way they live. Between their idyllic suburban lives and the disruptions of climate change, fewer and fewer geese are bothering to migrate. And in this respect, they are also similar to humans in the United States. 20% of Americans moved between 1955 and 1956. Between 2015 and 2016, just over 11% did. In fact, the more you look at it, the more connections you find between Canada geese and people. Our population has also increased dramatically in the past several decades. There were just over 2 billion people on Earth in 1935 when live goose decoys were made illegal in the US. In 2021, there are over 7 billion people. Like humans, Canada geese usually mate for life, although sometimes unhappily. Like us, the success of their species has affected their habitats. A single Canada goose can produce up to 100 pounds of excrement per year, which has led to unsafe E. coli levels in the lakes and ponds where they gather. And like us, geese have few natural predators. If they die by violence, it is almost always human violence, just like us. But even though Canada geese are perfectly adapted to the human-dominated planet, they seem to feel nothing but disdain for actual humans. Geese honk and strut and bite to keep people away, even though they're thriving because of our artificial lakes and manicured lawns. In turn, many of us have come to resent geese as a pest animal. I know I do. But they also allow me to feel like there's some proper nature in my highly sanitized, biologically monotonous suburban life. Even if geese have become mundane, there's still something awe-inspiring about seeing them fly overhead in perfect formation. Maybe that is the moment for Joe Von Warner. Maybe. Okay, maybe we're trying it anyway. Even if geese have become mundane, there's still something awe-inspiring about seeing them fly overhead in perfect formation. As one enthusiast put it, the Canada geese excites the imagination and quickens the heartbeat. More than pigeons or mice or rats, geese still feel wild to me. So I suppose it's a kind of symbiotic relationship in which neither party really much likes the other. Speaking of which, just before graduating from college, my girlfriend and I were on our way to pick up some groceries in her ancient blue hatchback when she asked me what my biggest fear was. Abandonment, I said. I was worried that the end of college would spell the end of our romance, and I wanted her to reassure me, to tell me that I need not fear being alone because she would always be there, and etc. But she wasn't the sort of person to make false promises, and most promises featuring the word always are unkeepable. I mean, everything ends, or at least everything humans have thus far observed ends. Anyway, after I said abandonment, she just nodded, and then I filled the awkward silence by asking her what her biggest fear was. Geese, she answered. And who can blame her? In 2009, it was a flock of Canada geese that flew a suicide mission into the engines of U.S. Airways Flight 1549. I don't think we need suicide mission there. And who can blame her? In 2009, it was a flock of geese that flew into the engines of U.S. Airways 1549, forcing Captain Sully Sullenberger to splash land the aircraft on the Hudson River. In 2014, a Canadian cyclist spent a week in the hospital after being attacked by a Canada goose. You can do something about abandonment. You can construct a stronger, independent self, for instance, or build a broader network of meaningful relationships so your psychological well being isn't wholly reliant upon one person. But you, as an individual, can't do much about the Canada goose. And that seems to me one of the great weirdnesses of the Anthropocene. Collectively, we have unprecedented power. For better or worse, land has become ours. It is ours to cultivate, to shape, even ours to protect. We are so much the dominant creature on this planet that we essentially decide which species live and which die, which grow like the Canada goose and which decline like its cousin, the spoon-billed sandpiper. But as an individual, I don't feel that power. I can't decide whether a species lives or dies. I can't even get my kids to eat breakfast. In the daily grind of a human life, there's a lawn to mow and soccer practices to drive to and a mortgage to pay. And so I go on living the way I feel like people always have, the way that feels like the right way and feels at times like the only way. I mow the lawn. I mow the lawn of Kentucky bluegrass as if lawns are natural, when in fact we didn't invent the suburban American lawn until 160 years ago. And I drive to soccer practice, even though that was also impossible 160 years ago, not only because there were no cars, but also because soccer hadn't been invented. And I pay the mortgage, even though mortgages as we understand them today weren't widely available until the 1930s. All of this and so much more happened in the last 1/1000th of human history. So much of what feels to me inevitably, inescapably human is in fact very, very new, including the everywhereness of the Canada goose. So I feel deeply unsettled about the Canada goose, both as a species and as a symbol. In a way, it's become my biggest fear. The goose isn't to blame, of course, but still, I can only give it 2 stars. I think I like those additions. All right, so now we're going to see that, and this one is also unfinished, heads up, but now we're going to see that in the context, because I'm a little worried about this coming immediately after the, the Canada Goose one, the teddy bears one. I mean, it makes a kind of sense, but it worries me. So, all right, here we go. The English word bear comes to us from a Germanic root, barrow, meaning the brown one or the brown thing. In some Scandinavian languages, the word for bear derives from the phrase honey eaters. Many linguists believe that these names are substitutes, created because speaking or writing the actual word for bear was taboo. As those in the wizarding world were taught never to say Voldemort, Northern Europeans often did not say their word for bear, perhaps because it was believed that saying the bear's true name could summon one. In any case, this taboo was so successful that today we are left with only the replacement word for bear. Essentially, we call them you know who. Even so, we've long posed a much greater threat to bears than they have to us. For centuries, Europeans tormented bears in a practice known as bear baiting. Bears would be chained to a pole and then attacked by dogs until they were injured or killed, or they'd be placed into a ring with a bull to fight to the death. England's royals loved this stuff. Henry VIII had a bear pit made at the Palace of Whitehall. And references to bear baiting even show up in Shakespeare, where Macbeth laments that his enemies have tied me to a stake. I cannot fly, but bear-like I must fight the course. This is an especially interesting passage since by Shakespeare's time, bears had been extinct in Britain for perhaps 1,000 years, likely due to overhunting by humans. And so in Shakespeare's England, to fight the course bear-like couldn't refer to bear behaviors in the natural world, only to the violence bears suffered and meted. Um, okay, that's okay. And so in Shakespeare's England, to fight the course bear-like couldn't refer to bear behaviors in the natural world, only to the violence bears suffered and meted out in a human choreographed spectacle. Although plenty of people recognized bear baiting as a rude and dirty pastime, as the diarist John Evelyn put it, religious objections to the practice weren't primarily about animal cruelty. Oh, that's okay. Okay. Um, all right, hold on. I got to fix this. Okay. Boop, 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 doop, doop, doop. Okay. Although plenty of people recognize bear baiting as a rude and dirty pastime, as the diarist John Evelyn put it, religious objections to it weren't primarily about animal cruelty. I'm just going to say objections. Well, I guess. Okay. Although plenty of people recognize bear baiting as a rude and dirty pastime, as the diarist John Evelyn put it, the objections to it weren't usually about animal cruelty. Quote, the Puritan hated bear baiting not because it gave pain to the bear, but because it gave pleasure to the spectators, wrote Thomas Babington Macaul. Then there's a footnote. Bear baiting might seem barbarous to us, but we excuse all kinds of immense animal suffering caused by humanity's consumption of meat, especially in wealthy countries. How strange it is to make cockfighting illegal, but not to make illegal the surgical removal of part of a chicken's beak when it is 1 day old. This common practice, known as debeaking, is used to prevent hens from pecking themselves or one another to death due to the stress. This practice, known as debeaking, is used to prevent hens from pecking themselves or one another to death due to the stress of extreme confinement. So it would be inaccurate to say that our dominion over bears is a wholly recent phenomenon. Still, it's a bit odd that our children now commonly cuddle with a stuffed version of an animal we used to be afraid to call by name. So here's the story of the teddy bear as it is usually told. In November of 1902, US President Teddy Roosevelt went bear hunting in Mississippi, which was an extremely Teddy Roosevelt thing to do. Roosevelt was an avid hunter and for a while had been something of a cowboy in the American West. At any rate, down in Mississippi, the hunting party's dogs chased a bear for hours before Roosevelt gave up and decided to return to camp to eat lunch. But then the dogs cornered the bear. The hunting guide, Holt Collier, another footnote. The guide in question, I'm not going to say that. I'm going to say Collier. Collier was a fascinating character in American history. He was born enslaved in Mississippi and after emancipation became known as one of the world's most accomplished horse riders. He also killed over 3,000 bears in his lifetime. But then, okay. Okay. But then the dogs cornered the bear. The hunting guide, Holt Collier, blew a bugle to alert the president's party to come, but before Roosevelt arrived, Collier clubbed the bear with a rifle because it had mauled one of his dogs. By the time the president arrived on the scene, the bear was tied to a tree and semi-conscious. Roosevelt refused to shoot it, feeling it would be unsportsmanlike, and word of the president's compassion spread throughout the country, especially after a cartoon in the Washington Post by Clifford Berryman illustrated the event. In the cartoon, the bear is reimagined as an innocent cub with a round face and large eyes looking toward Roosevelt with meek desperation. Morris and Rose Meacham, Russian immigrants living in Brooklyn, saw that cartoon and created a stuffed version of the cartoon cub they called Teddy's Bear. The bear was placed in the window of their candy shop and became an immediate hit. Curiously, a German firm independently produced a very similar teddy bear around the same time, and both companies ended up becoming hugely successful. The German manufacturer Steiff had been founded a couple decades earlier by Margarete Steiff, and her nephew Richard designed the Steiff teddy bear. By 1907, they were selling nearly 1 million of them per year. In Brooklyn, meanwhile, the Mitchums used their teddy bear sales to found the company Ideal Toys, which would go on to manufacture a huge array of popular 20th century playthings, from the game Mousetrap to the Rubik's Cube. Ideal also made the first Betsy Wetsy doll in 1934. When you poured water into Betsy Wetsy's mouth, the doll would kind of drip that water out of its pelvis into a diaper, a trick that at least the children in my home still find fascinating and hilarious. But we're not here to review 2.5-star urinating dolls. We're here to review the teddy bear. The standard contemporary teddy bear looks approximately like the 1902 ones did. Brown eyes, brown body, dark eyes, and a round face and a cute little nose. They're soft and squeezable. When I was a kid, there was a talking teddy bear named Teddy Ruxpin. A talking teddy bear named Teddy Ruxpin became very popular, but what I loved about teddy bears was their silence. They didn't ask anything of me or judge me for my emotional outbursts. One of my only vivid childhood memories is of my 10th birthday, retreating to my room after an exhausting birthday party, cuddling with a teddy bear, and thinking that it didn't really work anymore. that whatever had once soothed me about this soft and silent creature no longer did. I remember thinking that I would never be a kid again, not really, which was the first time I can remember feeling that intense longing for the you to whom you can never return. Sarah Dessen once wrote that home is not a place, but a moment. Home is a teddy bear, but only a certain teddy bear at a certain time. The bears of our imagination have become increasingly sweet and cuddly since the debut of the teddy bear. Winnie the Pooh arrived in 1926, Paddington Bear in 1958. The Care Bears showed up in 1981 as the ultimate unthreatening ursine friends. Characters like Funshine Bear and Love-A-Lot Bear starred in aggressively saccharine picture books with titles like Caring is What Counts and Your Best Wish Can Come True. In the broader world, at least those of us living in cities began to see bears as we thought Roosevelt had seen them, creatures to be pitied and preserved. If I forget to turn off the lights when leaving a room, my 5-year-old daughter, not 5 anymore, my daughter will often shout, "Dad, the polar bears!" because she has been taught that minimizing our electricity usage can shrink our carbon footprint and thereby preserve the habitat of polar bears. She's not afraid of polar bears, she's afraid of their extinction. The animals that once terrorized us, and that we long terrorized, are now often viewed as weak and vulnerable. The mighty bear has become, like so many creatures on Earth, dependent upon us. Their survival is contingent upon our wisdom and compassion, just as that bear in Mississippi needed Roosevelt to be kind. And so, in that sense, the teddy bear is a reminder of the astonishing power of contemporary humanity. It's hard to even understand how dominant our species has become, but I sometimes find it helpful to consider it purely in terms of mass. The total combined weight of all living humans currently on Earth is around 375 million tons. That's the so-called biomass of our species. The biomass of our livestock, sheep, chickens, cows, and so on, is around 800 million tons. And the combined biomass of every other large animal on Earth is less than 100 million tons. All the whales and tigers and monkeys and deer and bears together weigh less than a third of what we weigh. And then there's a footnote. We are all dwarfed by earthworms, though. Worms living below ground have a biomass of around 3,500 million tons, more than all mammals combined. For many species of large animals in the 21st century, the single most important determinant of survival is whether they are of more utility to humans, dead or alive. But if you can't be especially useful to people, the second best thing you can be is cute. You need to have an expressive face, ideally some large eyes. Your babies need to remind us of our babies. Something about you must make us feel guilty for eliminating you from the planet. Can cuteness save a species? I'm dubious. The part of the teddy bear story that often doesn't get told is that right after Roosevelt sportingly refused to kill the bear, he ordered a member of his hunting party to slit its throat so as to put it out of its misery. No bears were saved that day, and now there are fewer than 50 bears left in Mississippi. Global sales of teddy bears, meanwhile, have never been higher. I give the teddy bear 2.5 stars. 3 stars seems a little high to me now. Yeah, so I didn't think there was as much overlap with Canada geese as I was worried about, and I think that works okay. I don't know what y'all think, but I will find out later. Yeah. Yeah. This is the topic of penguins of Madagascar, how cute can save a species. I mean, I thought I was going to review Penguins of Madagascar for this book, and like I wrote a review of Penguins of Madagascar. Like maybe I'll just read it, but like it's not very good. And I think to make it good, I think to make it good is I don't know. So I mean, so this is the beginning I wrote, and then I never wrote the like actual part about the show. I mean, about the movie. I mean, I worry that like a review of Penguins of Madagascar is just going to go over well-trod territory in this book, and maybe the better, that's why I said I wanted to write a review of Lemmings, is that I think maybe the better approach is to write about this moment in documentary filmmaking when a crew of documentary filmmakers used a helicopter to herd lemmings over a cliff to make it appear as if the lemmings were so stupid and or suicidal that they all committed suicide together, when in fact, like, they were herded off the cliff by being terrified of this helicopter. But that also is a little, that's a little dark, and it's not much else. And I like the essays to be dark, but also other things. So anyway, this is the beginning of the Penguins of Madagascar thing that I wrote. Unless you've lived an exceptionally fortunate life, you've probably known someone who enjoyed having provocative opinions. I'm referring to the people who will say things to you like, you know, Ringo was the best Beatle. And then you'll take a long breath. Maybe you're out to lunch with this person because lunch is a time-limited experience and you can only bear this person's presence in minute quantities. So you'll take a bite of your food and then you'll sigh again before saying, why is Ringo the best Beatle? Well, the provocative opinion person is very glad you asked. Ringo is the best Beatle because, and then you stop listening because it's the only way to get through lunch. And when the person has finished, you say, okay, but Ringo also wrote Octopus's Garden. And then your provocative friend will regale you with a 14-minute lecture that begins, well, actually, Octopus's Garden is a work of considerable genius. Anyway, most of us are not provocative opinion people, thank God. But I think most of us secretly harbor at least one provocative opinion, and this is mine. The 2014 film Penguins of Madagascar is one of the best movies ever made. I don't know. It's all right. It's not a work of genius. Yeah, I don't know. We'll see. Some people liked it. Y'all are predisposed to saying nice things, though. So I do think that Penguins of Madagascar is one of the best movies ever made. Marina recommends that I review Civil Twilight. I mean, I tried, Marina. I tried really hard. Like, I looked at everything I could find out about Civil Twilight, and it's just not that interesting. Like, I said everything I had to say about Civil Twilight in that one video. And I think part of the reason that video is good is because you get to see Civil Twilight. Yeah. Yeah. I'll think about whether or not. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. The thing here, part of the thing here is that I want to have 7 new ones. I don't know why exactly. Like, that's a very. I don't know. I don't know exactly why I want to have 7 new ones, but I do. I feel like 6 new ones is not enough, and everyone will be disappointed if there are only 6 new ones, and people will be like, "You could have just gotten this book for free by reading the transcripts at wnyc.org," which is true. And yeah, so I don't know, but also, who cares? Part of the idea of the book is that most of it's available for free. I don't really like paywalling stuff if I don't have to. Yeah, so I guess I'll answer some questions before I have to go. But yeah, I was less bothered than I thought I would be by the conjunction of Canada geese and teddy bears. In fact, I thought it worked fine, and I thought the teddy bears episode works fine. And I like that there's a little bit more information about bear baiting. I'm a little on the fence about the chicken stuff, but yeah, that's the only thing that I was concerned about. Kate suggests that I review VidCon. No, I don't think so. I don't even know how I feel about VidCon. I can't even think about it. What program do you use to write? Microsoft Word or Google Docs. I don't have a fancy way of doing that stuff. Um, I don't have. Some of you want me to review Hank, but I don't. I it's a weird book because it's a memoir, but at the same time, I don't want to talk about my personal life that much. Uh, it's a weird thing, like writing. Like I'm writing a like this is a memoir, but it's a memoir where I'm like very carefully constraining what is a subject for review and mostly leaving out my family. So like I'm not writing about Sarah really. Um, yeah, because I just wouldn't. It wouldn't. I don't know. I just don't feel. I don't. I feel like there are places in my life where I wish that I could like roll back how much I shared, and I don't want to be in that position with a book, which you really can never roll back. Um, have you ever reviewed peanut M&Ms? No. I wonder, have I reviewed any candy? I don't think so. That's an interesting idea. I'm going to make a note of that. Because candy is a weird phenomenon. You want to talk about something that didn't exist 160 years ago. Uh, most candies. Okay. Why is Penguins of Madagascar one of the best movies ever made? Because it's about this human thing where we try to save cute animals and don't care about uncute animals. But I also kind of like wrote that essay. Um, Fossil Fighter says, Lincoln, you mean the worst American president? I knew someone who would often say that Abraham Lincoln was the worst American president. And like it was that's the person I was writing about. He also thought that Ringo was the best Beatle. Sam asks why I'm drinking Coke Zero and not Diet Dr. Pepper, and the answer is that there is a shortage of Coke Zero. I mean, of Diet Dr. Pepper in Indiana right now, and so I don't have any. Yeah. How many other movies are you reviewing? None. None, and no books either. I don't think. There's a couple songs, which is weird because I don't know anything about music. The things that I know anything about, I'm not interested in reviewing really. Just I don't know why. Like, yeah. So, uh, yeah. So I feel like the cute saves the species thing is done because I did it. So I don't know. Now I'm feeling like maybe don't review Penguins of Madagascar, and just do the teddy bears one, and then I have a review of the New Zealand 5-cent coin that I need to make some progress on this week. And then I could try to do Lemmings. Are you not including the review of Harvey? No, the review of Harvey is in the book. That's a place though, like it's different to write a memoir about a part of your life that is distant, right? Than like writing about relationships that are present tense relationships, like my relationship with Sarah or my relationship with my kids or whatever. I don't feel as troubled about writing about things from the past because it doesn't just doesn't bother me. Why was it a Rick roll and not a Hank roll? I don't know. I just thought it would be. I don't know. I kind of thought it would be funnier. It's been a long time since most people got Rick rolled, but I guess many people in Nerdfighteria have never been Hank rolled and like don't even know what it is. So there's a Diet Dr. Pepper shortage in much of America for a variety of reasons. The biggest reason is that there is a shortage of aluminum because soda makers did not anticipate how much of their product would be consumed at home versus at restaurants. And so they have there is going to be a long-term shortage of aluminum in the United States. Also, it's good because I shouldn't drink aluminum cans anyway. It's deeply disturbing. It's one of the ways that the people of the future will be like, "Oh my God, that guy was a monster." Yeah. Is the Haley's Comet review staying in? Yes, that one's already done. I rewrote it and everything. I wrote I wrote a whole new thing about Edmund Halley because I read two biographies of Edmund Halley. So I went from like knowing essentially nothing about him to knowing like way too much about him. So yeah, that one is still there. Um, is aluminum worse than glass? I mean, I think I think it depends on how you're defining worse. Like they're both pretty energy intensive. There's no good way to get Diet Dr. Pepper to the people. It's one of the big like it's a version of the big problem we have in general is that there's no currently no good way to get there's not a lot of ethical consumption in 21st century American life. Um, every time you say Indiana, I hear that gosh darn song. Like Back Home Again in Indiana? What gosh darn song? There's so many songs about Indiana. The Avett Brothers song where they talk about Indianapolis? There's so many good ones. I don't have a review of photographs in general, but I'm reviewing one photograph in particular. Three farmers on their way to a dance. It's the last essay in the book, actually, um, at least as currently imagined. Uh, Tom says, "What about syrup and a soda stream and tap water?" Yes, that is the way. That is the way, and that is what I should do. I should just buy a gigantic thing of Diet Dr. Pepper syrup and put it in my soda stream. The problem is that um, all of the like commercially available Dr. Pepper substitutes are horrible. So I'd have to buy like actually like I think they only sell it in by the gallon, which is a lot of syrup. But on the other hand, I drink a lot of Diet Dr. Pepper. So yeah, I mean, a lot of aluminum is recycled, but it doesn't matter because there's the recycling process is itself energy intense. I mean, it matters, but like the recycling process is itself energy intensive, and we still need to add new aluminum to the aluminum supply all the time because the recycling isn't perfectly efficient and so on. I should soda stream it is the long and short of it. But I mean, this is slightly off topic, but one of the big problems I have with like we need to worry about supply chains. Like everybody who consumes anything needs to worry about supply chains. I need to worry about where the paper that I signed came from, what kind of trees it came from. I need to worry about the supply chain when it comes to my food, the circumstances in which my food was harvested, and but so much of our so much of the way we talk about supply chain is focused on the consumer facing part of it. You know, so the packaging of something being recyclable versus where a huge amount of the energy and waste creation is, which is in the creation of the product itself. Like if you have like say you have like a organic granola bar, like a Kind bar or whatever, it'll brag all over the packaging about how all the packaging is recyclable. But what it doesn't talk about is the energy intensiveness involved in harvesting the oats and the chocolate, which come from different continents, and then getting those products from three or four different continents into one production facility where everyone is wearing rubber gloves that they replace every day, and everyone is wearing plastic hairnets that they have to replace every day. And then the actual production of the Kind bars is extremely energy intensive in terms of the amount of electricity that it requires, and the amount of packaging that goes into like the packaging of the raw materials. And it's just that's the part of the supply chain that we don't think about nearly enough. And I'm interested in finding ways to make all of that like more visible to us, so that both the working conditions of people who work in the in food production or other forms of manufacturing are more transparent to us, which makes the companies that produce those foods more accountable to their consumers. But also the amount of waste and kinds of waste that are created in that process are more apparent to us, I think there's a few ways to do that, but the main one is probably some form of regulation. But yeah, this is something that I think about every day. Um, I think about all the time, this huge, endless supply chain problem that we have, and that we like really paper over because corporations sort of greenwash the consumer facing side of it, and we don't feel as bad because the packaging is recyclable, but it doesn't take into account all of the things that go into the making of the thing. That's a tangent. I'm sorry, but it's something that Hank and I talk about a lot and are worried about in our own work and in other people's work. So, am I going to write another book after the Anthropocene Reviewed book? Yeah, hopefully. I mean, I don't know. I don't know, but I hope so. I'd like to. Um, I'd like to write a novel, and I'd like to write a few more episodes of the podcast, and I really enjoy writing in that format, and like I don't feel quite ready to say goodbye to writing essays, but I think I will at some point, by the end of the year or so, and then I will hopefully go back to writing a novel. So yeah, I mean, I'd like, I would like to have like most writers I know, I would like to have a long career. Like I've always wanted to have a long career more than I've wanted to have like a big career, if that makes sense. Like a lot of the writers I admire the most never had a big hit book, but they were able to keep doing their work for a long time and reach an audience. And so, that was kind of the career I set out to have. But you don't, you have you don't pick it, like you don't have control over it. And I happened to get really, really lucky. A few times, a lot of times actually, but like I got hugely lucky with The Fault in Our Stars, and it had a life that, or has a life that I never could have imagined, and um, but I'd still like to have a long career. Like I'd still like to, I'd like to be writing for an audience in 30 years, in a perfect world. But I don't, uh, I don't pick it. You have limited control over this stuff, so we'll see. But hopefully, yeah, I would like to write. I'd like to. I mean, there's a novel that I'm working on that I would like to finish and publish. But there's also other stuff I'd like to write down the road. Uh, you know, a lot of it is contingent upon life returning to enough normalcy that I have 6 or 7 hours a day to work, because for most of the last year I haven't. So it's been very difficult, as I know it has been for a lot of people. I mean, if you're lucky enough to have work, work is pretty difficult for most people right now. So yeah, I hope that I have um, a little more time in the future. But if I don't, that's fine. Like, family's much more important, and uh, yeah, so it goes. But yeah, so I appreciate very much y'all listening to me read and watching me as I tried to spruce up the Canada Goose. I guess it was fun. I enjoyed that a lot, and I hope to do it again next week, assuming that life is still uh yeah, like so, I don't know. I've stopped making predictions about the future is what I want to say. Uh yeah, so thank y'all for being here. I will read your comments later. Thanks for helping me spruce up the goose and DFTBA. See you next week, hopefully.